A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation of Vyasadev. In that association and by the mercy of those great Vedantists, I could hear them describe the attractive activities of Lord Krishna. And thus, listening attentively, my taste for hearing of the personality of Godhead increased at every step. Translation with repetition. O Vyasadev,
O Vyasadeva,
in that association and by the mercy of those great Vedantists, I could hear them describe the attractive activities of Lord Krishna. And thus, listening attentively, my taste for hearing of the personality of Godhead increased at every step. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Lord Shri Krishna, the absolute personality of Godhead, is attractive not only in his personal features, but also in his transcendental activities. It is so because the absolute is absolute by his name, fame, form, pastimes, entourage, paraphernalia, etc. The Lord descends to this material world out of his causeless mercy and displays his various transcendental pastimes as a human being, so that human beings attracted towards him become able to go back to Godhead. Men are naturally apt to hear histories and narrations of various personalities performing mundane activities, without knowing that by such association, one simply wastes valuable time and also becomes addicted to the three qualities of mundane nature. Instead of wasting time, one can get spiritual success by turning his attention to the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. By hearing the narration of the pastimes of the Lord, one contacts directly the personality of Godhead. And as explained before, by hearing about the personality of Godhead from within, all accumulated sins of the mundane creature are cleared. Thus, being cleared of all sins, the hearer gradually becomes liberated from mundane association and becomes attracted to the features of the Lord. Narada Muni has just explained this by his personal experience. The whole idea is that simply by hearing about the Lord's pastimes, one can become one of the associates of the Lord. Narada Muni has eternal life, unlimited knowledge, and unfathomed bliss. And he can travel all over the material and spiritual worlds without restriction. One can attain to the highest perfection of life simply by attentive hearing of the transcendental pastimes of the Lord from the right sources, as Sri Narada heard them from the pure devotees, Bhaktivedantas, in his previous life. This process of hearing in the association of devotees is especially recommended in this age of quarrel, Kali. Thus ends the wonderful transcendental Bhaktivedanta purport. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So it's a another beautiful verse which is coming in Bhagavatam, where we are seeing this wonderful transcendental discussion which is happening between Narad Muni and Vedavyas. And Narad Muni now has began to speak about his past life, which happened in another day of Brahma. But his memory is so sharp and he's remembering those incidents, explaining what all happened in his life, how he got transformed from that of a maid servant son to a transcendentalist who has got eternal knowledge, unfathomable bliss. How did all this happen? And we've been seeing in the series of verses before that how Vedavyas, who's the compiler of all the Vedic literatures, after having compiled everything, was still not satisfied. And Narad Muni could understand this dissatisfaction in the heart of Vedavyas, and he appears there. And one of the things which he says repeatedly in these verses that we have been seeing in this chapter is that you have not sufficiently, adequately glorified the Lord, the Supreme Lord, his activities. You've not done that. And since you have not done that, you are feeling that dissatisfaction in your heart. Very interestingly, the last few verses, like, I think on 23rd verse onwards, we are seeing Narad Muni explaining about his previous life. But previous to that verse, there was one verse, the 22nd verse, where Narad Muni is telling, Idam hi pumsas tapasas shrutasya va svistasya suktasya cha buddhi dattayoho abhichuta artha kavibhir nirupito yad uttama shloka gunanuvarna. Idam hi pumsah tapasas shrutasya va svistasya suktasya cha buddhi dattayoho abhichuta artha kavibhir nirupito. Kavibhir, the self-realized persons, have ascertained, have concluded, nirupito. What is abhichuta artha? The infallible aim of life is to engage in yad uttama shloka gunanuvarnana. Idam hi pumsas tapasas shrutasya va svistasya suktasya cha buddhi dattayo. Whether we are doing tapasa, whether we are doing shrutasya, we are reading Vedas, whether we are doing svistasya, sacrifice, whether we are doing suktasya, spiritual education, whatever we are doing, ultimate aim of life, and this is infallible aim. It is not that it is for me, not for you, for somebody else, maybe it is different. No. Learned circles have positively concluded, nirupito, that the infallible purpose of the advancement of knowledge, namely austerities, study of the Vedas, sacrifice, chanting of hymns, and charity, culminates in the transcendental descriptions of the Lord, who is defined in choice poetry. This is the infallible aim of life. The advancement of knowledge should culminate in description, in the transcendental descriptions of the Lord. That's why the Lord's name is Uttama Shloka, who's glorified in choices poetry. And then we have been seeing how in the last few verses, the most precarious, unfortunate situation that one can be put into, like Narad Muni, being born as a son of a maid servant, father is not known, 5-year-old. No, the environment is absolutely not conducive. But how did he become Narad Muni? So it all started with the 4 months of Chaturmasya, when this Vedantists, that's how the Bhagavatam describes. But as we see more and more, this verse, today's verse also, they were talking about Krishna's glories. So they are not some impersonalists or any other class of Vedantists. They are devotees. They are pure devotees of the Lord. So they were staying there, they were living together, and in that time when they were living together in Narad Muni's house, he could get the good fortune of engaging in their personal service. And as we have been seeing, Prabhupada writes that it is the business of this Vedantis to reclaim the fallen souls from this condition, from this material world. It is their business. They are expert in doing that. And we saw in the last verse that we took, the last Bhagavatam class, Uchishta lepan anumodito dvijay, sakritsma bhunje tadapasta kilvishaha, evam pravritasya visuddha chetasas tadharma evatma ruchih prajayate. Narad Muni just took once, Sakrat Sma Bhunje Tadapas the Kilvisha. He just took the remnants of their food, of this Vedantists, by their permission, Anumoditaha, and by so doing, all his sins were at once eradicated. Sakratsma bhunje tadapasta kilvishaha. And thus, being engaged, I became purified in heart. And at that time, the very nature of the transcendentalist became attractive to me. So we saw this in the last class where Prabhupada was telling that how, even association with devotees can be contagious, infectious, the word used, in a positive sense. Like some disease which transmits, which is contagious. When we come in touch with someone, we become, infected with that disease. Similarly, these qualities of this Vedantist, the qualities of this pure devotees is also very infectious. It can transmit to a person. Of course, it depends on the person who's the recipient also. If a person is Dante, if he's Adhrita Kridanake, if he's Anuvartini, if he's Sushrushamane, like Narada Muni, he was self-controlled, he was not attached to sports. Anuvartini, he was following the footsteps of this devotees. He was obedient, and then Sushrushamane, he was very faithful. Then the infection spreads even rapidly, more rapidly, right? And it happens. Like sometimes we say this. Some people are more prone to have this disease, and some people are less prone. So a person who has got all these abilities, immediately he gets infected with these positive qualities of this transcendentalist. And today, in sequence, actually, how does this process of transformation work? How does it happen? We saw how those qualities are necessary for receiving the quality, for receiving those transcendental qualities. There are like Dante, Adhrita Kridanaka, all those things which we saw. Then we saw that he just took this remnant of this Vedantist just once, Sakrat, and all the Kilvisha became cleansed. All these things became purified. And in today's verse is so beautiful, so wonderful. Again, it is in series, in sequence, what's happening to Narad Muni, what happened next. So he's telling here, of course, our title is Attentive Hearing, the Secret of Liberation. Let's understand this verse one more time. Very beautiful verse. Let me read the translation. Oh, Vyasadev. The word used in the verse for Vyasadev is Anga. Oh, Vyasadev, in that association, and by the mercy of those great Vedantists. In that association is referring to the word Tatra. Tatra Anu. Tatra Anu. In that association, in that place, one day. So in that association, and by their mercy, so their mercy is also there. Anugrahena. So Anugrahena, there was a mercy which was bestowed by this Vedantists, by this pure devotees of the Lord on this very poor maid-servant son. Actually, what is the qualification of Narad Muni at that point in time? He just said, son of a maid-servant, doesn't deserve to be part of this, glorious description of transcendental activities of the Lord, but they allowed Anugrahena by their compassion. So Vyasadev, in that association and by the mercy of those great Vedantists, I could hear them describe, I could hear them Ashranvan, Ashranavam, I could hear them describe Pragayatam, describing. They were singing, they were all constantly engaged in glorifying the Lord. Pragayatam. So I could hear them describe the attractive activities of Lord Krishna. Manoharaha. The activities of Lord Krishna are Krishna Katha, and that Krishna Katha is Manohara. In that association and by the mercy of those great Vedantists, I could hear them describe the attractive Manohara Krishna Katha, activities of Lord Krishna. And thus, listening attentively. Listening attentively is the word for that Prabhupada uses as Vishranvataha. Vishranvataha, hearing attentively. My taste for hearing, Ruchihi, my taste for hearing of the personality of Godhead increased every step. Abhavat, Mama Abhavat, Anupadam. So Anupadam Mama Anubhava Abhabhat Ruchihi. So very interestingly, this verse that we are seeing, is talking about a process how a son of a maid servant developed taste for hearing Krishna Katha. And what are those secrets? What is that Narad Muni is telling? Actually, there is a lot, can be covered in this verse, but we're always, limited by the time. So being mindful of that, let me quickly go into this, the deep dive into this verse. The main theme for today's talk is the main theme. If you really want to take this, you see, this is such a powerful thing. We may miss out on this. That's why I have highlighted here from the purport what Prabhupada is saying, that the whole idea is that simply by hearing about the Lord's pastimes, one can become one of the associates of the Lord. It's a secret. The secret of hearing is that you get liberation. I'm seeing the day when we started our talk on this, Narad Muni describing his own pastimes. That was the day when Chaturmasya started, almost on the same day. Today I am talking about the secret of hearing is to become liberated from this material world, and today happens to be our Independence Day, right? The day when we got our freedom, 15th August. The whole nation will be celebrating, and many here also will be celebrating. We want to become free, but the real freedom, the real liberation, the liberation from the cycle of birth and death comes just by hearing about the Lord's pastimes. This is what Prabhupada is writing. The whole idea is that simply by hearing about the Lord's pastimes, one can become one of the associates of the Lord. You become a resident of Vaikuntha Loka. You become an associate of the Lord. That's the power of hearing about Lord's pastimes. But there is a what is to be heard, how it is to be heard, and why it is to be heard. Has to be very clear. Hearing the sound is so fundamental. Actually, if we see in our Bhagavatam also tells that, this gross things like Bhumirapo Analavayu Kham Manabuddhirevacha Ahankara Itiyame Bhinna Prakriti Rashtra. So there are gross things: earth, water, air, fire, and ether. In these gross things, as we go from earth to ether, it becomes subtle and subtle and subtle. So there are this 5 senses and the sense objects. Like the most subtle thing is the process of hearing, which comes in ether. The most subtle, and even if you see our Navavidha Bhakti, it starts with Shravanam, because that is the seed to all other 8 ones. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Pada Sevanam. So first is Shravanam. So the whole idea is that simply by hearing about the Lord's pastimes, one can become one of the associates of the Lord. Just to set the context about hearing, I can go on talking about it, but just to step back, forget about spirituality, forget about spiritual thing, hearing the pastimes, forget about that. Just the fact of the power of the sound or the power of the sense of hearing is so important. I remember very distinctly when I was studying in school, there was a movie which was released. I'll not say what name of that movie was, but long back. And there is a song which became popular at that time. And even till today, if I hear that song used to get played loudly in many of those speakers in those days. In India, they don't just care for any of this noise thing and all. So it gets played. Moment I hear that song now also, I get the memory of that my school, the place where I was studying. Everything becomes clear in my mind. I just get completely transformed to that. Even though now somewhere and accidentally you hear that song, you go into that thing. The sound has so much of importance in our life. That is why the last Vedanta Sutra, which is composed by Vedavyas, it says Anabratihi Sasabda. Anabratihi Sasabda. This transcendental sound vibration, which comes from Golokera Premadhana Harinama Sankirtan, which comes from Goloka, Anabratihi, it can remove all this contamination. It can make us eligible to go back to home, back to Godhead. and no more take birth again in this material world. The power of sound, the power of hearing, the power of holy name. So let us just see the words even more closely. If you read the translation, this translation is so loaded. I mean, it has got so many important points. If you see this, let's read this one more time. Oh, Vyasadev, in that association and by the mercy of those great Vedantists, I could hear them describe the attractive activities of Lord Krishna. And thus, listening attentively, my taste for hearing of the personality of Godhead increased at every step. Now, if you really want to reflect on this translation this entire week, if you want to think, what are the important points? Let me highlight this again. There are two words in this which I put it in red. I could hear them. Okay, first is hear. And my taste for hearing of the personality of Godhead increased at every step. So I could hear, and my taste for hearing increased, right? But very interestingly, the question that arises is, how did he hear? How did Narad Muni, when you are not on mute. So how did Vyasadev, how did Narad Muni hear? So he's telling, oh Anga, oh Vyasadev, in that association, hearing also has to happen in the association of devotees. In that association, and by the mercy of those great Vedantists. Actually, this fact may not be so elaborately explained in the purport, but it shows how Narad Muni is taking this position of humility, a humble position. He feels I was not deserving. I don't deserve to hear this wonderful conversation which is happening between these Vedantists. But by their mercy, they were very merciful to me. This is one of the sign of advancement. Many times, because when we take up to this process of Krishna consciousness, we forget our position, what we were before. We just take up to Krishna consciousness, so I have now become initiated, and we develop a familiarity, and based on those familiarity, we develop a contempt. It becomes, yeah, theek hai, and now I'm also initiated. Prabhu, kya ho raha hai? So like after a few days. So that familiarity is such a hindrance in our spiritual growth. We don't even realize. So Narad Muni, even though he is Narad Muni, right, he is telling by their mercy, by the mercy of those great Vedantists, I got a chance to hear. Often when I see that, sometimes people come to hear Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam class, but why they are not able to hear actively. There is a difference between active listening, active hearing versus passive listening and a passive hearing. One of the main reasons is there is a familiarity for the speakers, or in our mind we think he is junior, or he is not competent. And these filters, when we put it in our mind, our hearing becomes blocked. There is no active listening. I'm sitting, what happened? Did you hear? No, Prabhu, I joined late. I could not hear. I was there, but I was not there. Physically, we may be present, but our mind is acting somewhere else. It is going somewhere else. Because we are not, first of all, there is no love and affection for a sadhu, for a person who is glorifying the activities of Krishna. He's not doing his own thing. And secondly, I have put some barriers in my mind. Okay, this person, assumptions. What he is going to speak, I assume in my mind. You're not the body of spirit. So we have heard this. By my conclusion, I have already finished. I mean, I'm not even listening. I'm not even interested in listening. So that humility is a very important thing. By the mercy of this great Vedantist, I could hear that's in red. I could hear them. The important thing is to hear. I'm busy with some services. I'm doing this activity. I'm doing that activity. Those activities are all useless actually. There is some merit. You'll get some credit for doing some services, but those services will not last. Your consciousness will never get purified if you're not hearing. If it is not accompanied by hearing, even to sustain in service, you cannot do this. So I could hear them describe the attractive activities. Activities of the Lord are not some ordinary things that we have to, add some rasa. It is naturally attractive. So wonderful, this activities of the Lord. That is why he is called Uttama Shloka. Here it is used another word, Punya Shrava. Attractive activity and Manohara, these activities this captures our mind. Attractive activities of Lord Krishna, and thus listening attentively. See, attentively, very important. Vishwanvata, thus listening attentively. My taste for hearing, Ruchi, right now we have no taste at all. Somebody is telling it is for him to speak. I don't care what he speaks. It says this thing. Or if I am asked to speak, I just somehow have to speak. I've been asked to speak. There's no taste for hearing. Ruchi, it will come. No taste for hearing. It can come. As Narada Muni is giving his own example, and how did he develop? My taste for hearing of the personality of God had increased at every step. So he heard attentively in the association of devotees. By their mercy, he is grateful to them by getting this opportunity to hear and the attractive activities of Lord Krishna, and thus listening attentively, this thing happened. This is actually, you need to, this translation has to be reflected. It is not just simply one thing. What happens is, often when we hear, we don't see what Prabhupada is trying to say in our own words. We don't try to do that. We just, okay, then you ask, well, what is Ichha Dvesa Samuthena? Can you tell the words? I'll see the words and I'll read the translation, seeing at the page of Bhagavad Gita. Not like that. I have to put that words in my own mouth. I have to describe that in my own understanding. I have to understand this. So associate every word in this translation is important. That is how the process works. If we are not attentive to all these small details, we can never get that taste, that relish. Let's see the purport. This is all about the translation. The purport is a brilliant purport. This kind of purports, has to be read and understood in various angles, because it is so systematically written, and there are so many things which can come out by churning, by again discussing, by seeing from this angle, by seeing from another angle. The way that I want to present this is, it's not from the beginning, not from the end. Of course, I said the most important thing which I highlighted at the beginning is simply by hearing Harikatha, one can become an associate of the Lord. That's our main theme. But if you see how Prabhupada has built that, how do you build this? What is the logic? How can you say that? Simply by hearing Krishna Katha, one can become an associate of the Lord? What is the proof? How do I know that? Very beautifully Prabhupada explains this. Look at this purport, wonderful purport of Prabhupada. Prabhupada is saying, I've just highlighted this, men are naturally apt to hear histories and narrations of various personalities performing mundane activities, without knowing that by such association, one simply wastes valuable time and also becomes addicted to the three qualities of mundane nature. It's this sentence, men are naturally apt to hear. Are we not, falling into this category where Prabhupada is saying men are naturally apt to hear? We have got this ability to hear, and we naturally like hearing about histories and narrations of the various personalities performing mundane activities. So many of us, we hear about so many. He's our hero. He has done this extraordinary things. We want to know more about them. How did he do this? What did he do? What is this? So many queries, so many questions about them. But little do we know that such association, only one simply wastes valuable time and also becomes addicted to the three qualities of mundane nature. Where do we get this reference? Reference is very important from Vedic scriptures. When a statement is made, what is the reference? Beautifully, our Sukadev Goswami, when he begins to speak in the second canto of Bhagavatam to Parikshit Maharaj, and one of the first things that he speaks, Shruttavyadini Rajendra Nrinam Santi Sahasrasaha Apasyatam Atmatattvam Griheshu Grihamedhinam. Shruttavyadini Rajendra. Shruttavya. What is worthy of hearing? We can hear so many things. Every day there is social media, there is news, there is channels, this, that, so many distractions. So many things one can learn and hear. No dearth, no dearth of channels or the means by which we can access this. Available in all forms of, just bombarded. And on top of that, the virtue of being in Kali Yuga.
ಇವನು ಮಿಥುನು ಬರ್ತಾನೆ ಮೈ.
And the virtue of being in Kali Yuga is that your attention span is very small, very less attention span. People can't sit closely for 10 minutes, 10 to 12 minutes, okay, 12 minutes, 2 minutes extra. No attention. 1 minute, if somebody could hear something attentively, it's a great accomplishment. So here, Sukadev Goswami, before he even begins to speak, he's telling Shrotavyadini Rajendra Nrinam Santi Sahasrasaha Apasyatam Atmatattvam Griheshu Grahamedina. Actually, the people who are Grahamedhi, who are Apasyatam, who are blind to self-realization, the knowledge of self-realization, for them, thousands of topics are there. Shrotavyadini Rajendra Nrinam Santi Sahasrasaha. So many things they talk about in this life. This thing, that thing, this life, this thing, that glory is this thing. Because they are apasyatam atmatattvam. They are not able to see, they are blind to self-realization. So they have created thousands of topics. What is the verse? So the verse is those persons who are materially engrossed, being blind to the knowledge of ultimate truth, have many subject matters for hearing in human society. Very interestingly, I want you to step back. You know, when Sukadev, we know this verse which is spoken by Sukadev Goswami. He speaks to Parikshit in the second canto beginning. When he begins to speak, first he glorifies that this question that you are asking, O King, is very, very important, very pertinent, very glorious. But it's important to know what is the question which Parikshit has asked, and why did, before even beginning to speak, why Sukadev Goswami is telling these are the kind of people, or these are the kind of questions you should not be asking, or these are the topics you should not be hearing. You should not be interested in hearing this. What is that Parikshit asked? Parikshit Maharaj has put this question before Sukadev Goswami. Bhagavatam mentions in the first canto, you are the spiritual master of great saints and devotees. I am therefore begging you to show the way of perfection for all persons. Mind you, for all persons, and especially for one who's about to die. Please let me know what a man should hear, chant, remember, and worship, and also what he should not do. Please explain all this to me. So Parikshit Maharaj's question is very direct and very relevant for all of us, because we are hearing so many things in this life. So many things we are putting our attention to. He's telling you are the spiritual master of great saints and devotees. So I'm begging you to show the way of perfection for all persons, and especially, now it's further qualified, for those who's about to die. That's all of us. All of us are going to die. We don't know when it is. Maybe it is tomorrow, next day. So how careful we should be. And therefore, who's about to die, please let me know what a person should hear. What, imagine if somebody has really told you that this is what it is, you've got another 1 month's time. That's all. After that, you'll be gone. One should be really worried. What should I hear? What should I chant? What should I remember? What should I do? What should I not do? And in that connection, first thing he says is this Shruta Vyadini Rajendra Pranam Santi Sahasrasa Apasyatam Atmatattvam Griheshu Grahamedina. He also goes on to speak about the next few verses where he says how these Grahamedis waste their time in day by maintaining the kutumba, and in the night by having sleep or sex. And then he says Dehapatya Kalatradishu Atma Sainyeshu Asatsu Api Tesham Brahmatta Nidhanam Pashyanapi Na Pashyat. Dehapatya, they take care of their body. Apatya, their children. Kalatras, the spouse. Dehapatya Kalatradishu Atma Sainyeshu Asatsu Api. They consider them to be their own soldiers. Atma Sainyeshu Asatsu Api Tesham Brahmatta Nidhanam. They're so engrossed that they don't see that they're all getting destroyed. Tesham Brahmatta Nidhanam, in the due course of time, in the crushing wheel of time, where each one of us is getting crushed. They don't see that. Apasyatam Apasyatam Atma Tattvam is here. Pashyan apina pashyati. There it is, they're seeing also, they don't see. Having said this, 2.234, fifth verse, he says what one should hear. Why one should hear, what one should hear. So this is the verse which is spoken by Sukadeva Goswami. He says, Tasmad. Tasmad means therefore. Tasmad comes only when you have stated some things before. Tasmad Bharata Sarvatma Bhagavan Ishwaro Hari. Shrotavyah Kirtitavyascha Smartavyascha Ichchata Bhayam. So important. Actually, you see, the characteristic of a person who is in this material world, he is characterized by fear, fearful of his situation, his condition in this material. Always fearful. Kya hoga mere ko? Kya ho jayega? Fearful of my life. What am I going to do? What's going to happen? What if something is gone? What if something is lost? The reason being he is not absorbed in hearing Harikatha. Here, in the translation of this beautiful verse, actually, Prabhupada is writing, for descendant of King Bharata, one who desires to be free from all miseries, cha ichchata abhayam, if you want to become free from all these miseries, then you must hear about, glorify, and also remember the personality of God, who is the super soul, the controller, and the savior from all miseries. Tasmad Bharata Sarvatma Bhagavan Ishwaro Harihi. Shrotavyah Kirtitavyascha. First thing is Shrotavyah. Shrotavyah. This is must. The word used is Shrotavyah Kirtitavyah cha Smartavyascha Ichchatabhaya. Okay, let's move on. So then what Prabhupada is doing, again, the brilliance, the magic of Prabhupada. So first he told that we are all apt to hear all these mundane things. We can hear about all these things, but it is a simply waste of valuable time, and it makes one addicted to the three qualities of mundane nature. Then Prabhupada shifts gear to the next gear he goes. And so we saw also reference from Vedic literature how Sukadeva Goswami is telling Shrotavyadini Rajendra Nrinam Santi Sahasrasa Apasyatam Atma Tattva Greheshu Grahamedina. So there are so many thousands of topics we can talk, but these are all waste of time. Greheshu Grahamedina Apasyatam Atma, because they have not seen the Atma Tattvam, that's why they are doing all this. Instead, Prabhupada is writing, instead of wasting time, one can get spiritual success by turning his attention to the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. Just turning attention to the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. By hearing the narration of the pastimes of the Lord, one contacts directly the personality of Godhead. And as explained before, by hearing about the personality of Godhead from within, all accumulated sins of the mundane creature are cleared. Let me ask you a question here, all the interested, attentive listeners. Where is it mentioned? Prabhupada is writing here that as explained before, by hearing about the personality of Godhead from within, all accumulated sins of the mundane creature are cleared. Where is it mentioned? Bhagavad Tattva. Okay. Who all are sitting in the temple hall?
Badri Prabhu, Panduranga Prabhu, Palini, Mukund, Madhav, and Balaram Das.
Where is Hari Gopal?
He's not here.
I'm here, Prabhu.
Hari, any answer? Where is it mentioned earlier?
Shrotavyadini, that shloka you were explaining.
No. I'm saying in the purport. Shrota Vyadini comes in the second canto. Prabhupada is saying it is already explained before. Where is it mentioned? Okay, Palini Mataji.
I'm not able to locate it, Prabhu.
Balaram Prabhu.
Shrunvatam swakata Krishna punya shravana kirtanaha hridayantastho hi abhadrani vidhunoti suhritsatam.
Perfect. That's the answer. First canto, second chapter. Actually, Sutta Goswami says this verse. Shrunvataha swakatha Krishna punya shravana kirtanaha hridayantastho hi abhadrani vidhunoti suhritsatam. The Lord who is seated in our heart as Suhrut, Vidhunoti, He cleanses this heart. When we Srinvatam Swakatha Krishna, when Swakatha, His own Katha, His own activities, His own instructions, when we hear Srinvata Swakatha Krishna, Punya Shravana Kirtana, Hridayantasto hi Avadrani, Vidhunoti, it is completely, Dhunoti, Vidhunoti, completely cleansed. Vidhunoti Suhrut Satam. We chant the verse every day before starting our Bhagavatam class. Nashtaprayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhakti. No, before that, Narayanam namaskrit. Nashtaprayeshu abhadreshu. Again, that word abhadra is there. This abhadras, this contaminations in the heart goes. Nashtaprayeshu abhadreshu. By regular hearing and serving a pure devotee Bhagavatam. By regular attendance in classes and by hearing Bhagavatam. So, Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Se Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati next. So you see this verse, this purport which Prabhupada is writing, instead of wasting time, one can get spiritual success by turning his attention. Attention needs to be turned to the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. By hearing the narration of the pastimes of the Lord, one contacts directly the personality of Godhead. And as explained before, by hearing about the personality of Godhead from within, all accumulated sins, Shrunvata Swakatha Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtanaha Hridayantastohi Avadrani Vidhunoti Suhrutsata. All the sinful things which is there, all contaminations, Avadrani, the mundane creature are cleared. Where else? What else is the reference? Beautiful reference is given. We'll come to this later. So let's skip. Oh, so many things. Sorry, it was not intended. Yeah, so this is the verse I wanted to say. Where is it mentioned that when we hear Krishna Katha, Krishna himself cleanses? This is a beautiful verse. Pravishta Karna Randhrena Swanam Bhavo Saroruham Dhunoti Samalam Krishna Salilasya Yathas. Pravishta Karna Randhrena. When this transcendental activities, this sound vibration, this transcendental sound vibration, when it enters through our ears, Pravishta Karna Randhrena Swanam Bhavo Saroruham Dhunoti Samalam Krishna Salilasya Yathasara. So Prabhupada is writing, if you see the translation beautifully, the sound incarnation of Lord Krishna, the sound incarnation of Lord Krishna, the supreme soul, that is Srimad Bhagavatam, enters into the heart of a self-realized devotee. It enters into the heart of a self-realized devotee, sits on the lotus flower of his loving relationship, and thus cleanses the dust of material association. So Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the sound incarnation of Krishna, which is transcendental, it enters into the heart of a self-realized devotee, sits on the lotus flower of his loving relationship, and cleanses the dust of material association, such as lust, anger, and hankering. Thus, it acts like autumnal rains upon pools of muddy water. I don't know if I've not seen this happen so much in the US. Maybe it should be happening, but in India, for sure, I have seen the ponds, the rivers, the small water bodies, they become muddy and the water becomes contaminated. But immediately when there is a fresh shower, there is an autumn shower, after that, everything, the water looks crystal clear. It becomes completely clear. Thus it acts like autumnal rains upon pools of muddy water. Similarly, when this Krishna Katha goes, it is Katha only. Like it is water, it's a rain water, it is Katha which goes. But when it goes, it cleanses our heart, which is like that muddy pool of water. I want you to pay attention to this beautiful small video where a disciple of Prabhupada is telling how this Krishna Katha, which Prabhupada has put it in this books, in this transcendental books like Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, how it acts, and why should we read Prabhupada books very, very carefully? Why should we read this? Very important one, just pay attention. Importance of reading Srila Prabhupada books. Let's hear this. What can I do to make this play work? Give me one second. Where is it? Can you see my screen? No problem. Hear this carefully.
Yes, Prabhu.
For some reason, it has become very slow. You are seeing the full screen or no?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Good.
He said, "Can you quote me this verse?" So the two of us looked at each other. I was looking at him. I thought, all right, tomorrow Krishna goes on, he'll quote the verse. And he was looking at me, and he thought, Bhagavad will do it. Neither of us knew the verse. Then Prabhupada said, "Just see, you are not reading my books." He said, "Every day you have to read my books. You have to study my books and learn my books, just like a lawyer learns the law books." He said, "You must know everything, chapter and verse." He said, "If you do not know, how will you preach? How will you teach these men unless you know my books? Every day you have to read my books." And he said, "Do you know that every day even I read my own books?" So both of us were looking at him. He said, "Do you know why I read my books?" Again, we didn't want to venture any answers because we already realized we were in a lose-lose situation. It's like nothing we could say was going to be right. So he said, I read my books every day because even I learn something new when I read my books. He said, do you know why I learn something new when I read my books? He said, because these are not my books. I do not write these books. And he spoke, and when he started to speak at this moment, it was like something came over him. It was like so mystical. He said every morning, he had his hand up like this. You know how Prabhupada used to put up his hand like this? Every morning, when I sit here to read my books, to write my books, Krishna comes personally and he dictates to me what to write. He said, and so I simply take dictation from Krishna and I write these books. He said, therefore, when I read them, even I learn something. And it was like so dramatic the way he said it. And we just felt the weight. And I was sitting there, I was thinking, I'm speaking with the person who's speaking with God. He's there. He's right next to God. I'm only one person removed from God. It's so close. And yet I knew, because of the state of my own consciousness, how far away I actually was. But that by some grace, I was being placed just right next to God by being with Prabhupada. It was just so amazing.
So you saw how he's telling that this is Krishna himself is writing this. Right? It is not written by Prabhupada or anything. It's Krishna writing, personally coming and writing these books. So, and then the other important thing is understand every word before you move on. So this devotion is in pictures is ignored. Understand every word before you move on. Every word in this purport, every word in the translation, every word of Bhagavatam is important. And this also have a small clip. I don't know if it will play or not. I have no idea why it is not playing. Generally it should play. I'll just take a little extra and then tell you this. Very beautiful one. So presence is not coming. Okay, if I get that towards the end, I'll show you. Otherwise, let's just continue with this. What I have to share. Okay, now, so there is a small clipping that I had of another devotee who says why it is important to understand every word of Srila Prabhupada. I'm not able to play that clip. So let's just pay attention to the last few lines of the purport, right? There is a lot in that line. We saw that just by hearing the transcendental activities of the Lord, one can become an associate of the Lord. But how do we hear? how do we hear is a very important thing. What to hear? We have to hear the transcendental sound vibration, which is either the holy names of the Lord or the instructions of the Lord. Krishna Katha can be spoken by Krishna or about Krishna. So here, in this last few lines of the purport, Prabhupada is writing, one can attain to the highest perfection of life simply by attentive hearing of the transcendental pastimes of the Lord from the right sources, as Sri Narada heard them from the pure devotees, Bhakti Vedantas, in his previous life. This process of hearing in the association of devotees is especially recommended in this age of Kali, quarrel. Now, in this line, if in this few lines, if you see it a little carefully, one can attain to the highest perfection of life simply by attentive. One can attain to the highest perfection of life simply by attentive hearing. First is attentive hearing to the transcendental pastimes of the Lord from the right sources. You see, sometimes people hear some Astha channel, some other channel, somebody speaking. He's talking transcendental pastimes of the Lord, but it is not from the right source. It has to be from the right source. Right source is someone who's a representative of Sukadev Goswami, who's coming in the parampara, who has heard. We have to repeat those words of Srila Prabhupada. Those words of Srila Prabhupada has potency. No other words. We may hear, we may feel good for some time, but it will not do the heart transformation. So two things are important. One has to come in association of devotees, and in association of devotees also, if somebody is not hearing Harikatha, he is busy doing some other important things, some material talks, he may get little inspired here and there. He may have some benefit of that. But one has to hear Harikatha, and one has to hear Harikatha in association of devotees. Only hearing Harikatha, but not hearing it from the right source. So many professional speakers are there who can speak so wonderfully, so gloriously, but it will not have any heart transformation. And if you are in association of devotees, you are coming and you're talking, you're doing something, you're doing so many things, but you don't have Harikatha there, then also it will not have an impact. So one can attain to the highest perfection of life simply by attentive hearing of the transcendental pastimes of the Lord from the right sources, as Sri Narada heard them from the pure devotees, Bhakti Vedantas, in his previous life. This process of hearing in the association of devotees is especially recommended in this age of Kali. I have a few quotes. I'll just quickly share those, and they are very, very powerful and relevant to what we have been just discussing. Srila Rupa Goswami has recommended that one live in the association of those who are of the same mentality. Therefore, it is necessary to form some association for Krishna consciousness and live together for the cultivation of knowledge of Krishna and devotional service. The most important item for living in that association is the mutual understanding of the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. This is Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, chapter 12. This is Rupa Goswami's recommendation. Rupa Goswami is recommending that one live in the association of those who are of the same mentality. You can't go and live in somebody who's envious of Prabhupada, envious of the devotees, or something, or some other thoughts. Somebody who's very distinct, very different. Even if they're Vaishnavas, they may have some other understanding. You can't have. So same mentality. And it is necessary that to form an association of Krishna consciousness and live together for the cultivation of knowledge. The reason for coming together is cultivation of knowledge of Krishna and devotional service. Most important item for living in that association is the mutual understanding of the Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam. Most important item for living in that association is mutual understanding. Next, when we shall feel pleasure by hearing Krishna, by hearing about Krishna or talking about Krishna, we must know that we are making progress on the path of perfection. And at that time, any kind of this material suffering will not be felt. That is the practical effect of executing devotional service. This is a test. This is a test of our devotional life. How are we placed? When we shall feel pleasure by hearing about Krishna or talking about Krishna. You can talk about Krishna only when you are hearing well. If your hearing is defective, you're not hearing properly, you're not reading properly, how can you explain? It is not possible. The input is not there. If it is not going, output will not come. When we shall feel pleasure by hearing about Krishna or talking about Krishna, we must know that we are making progress on the path of perfection. And at that time, any kind of this material suffering will not be felt. We know that we're just 2 weeks or 3 weeks away from Janmashtami. I'm reminded of, there's so many pastimes of Prabhupada when, for Janmashtami, when all his disciples were seated. One day, one such occasion where Prabhupada asked their disciples to read from Krishna book. So they started reading from first chapter. It is 9 o'clock in the morning, and the idea was to finish the entire Krishna book by Janmashtami, by night. And till 5 p.m., Prabhupada saw that they've not yet finished the entire Krishna book. They're reading, but still it is some halfway through or something. And then Prabhupada came, and Prabhupada, after that, whatever the chapter the disciples they were taking turns and they were reading these different chapters of Krishna book. Prabhupada, asked them how far you have gone. And from there onwards, Prabhupada just chanted the verses of Bhagavatam. Only the Sanskrit verses. Because reading the Krishna book, it could take longer time. But he read all those verses, sweet nectarian verses of 10th canto. He said, even if you don't understand what I just spoke, because it's all in Sanskrit, still this transcendental sound vibration will purify you. And another occasion, probably it was the first Janmashtami, where all these disciples they were fasting till midnight, and at midnight Prabhupada started saying, "Where is the Krishna book? Let's read from Krishna book." So somebody brought the Krishna book and then started reading the first chapter. Somehow they finished the first chapter. They were already feeling sleepy. And they were eager to break their fast. They finished the first chapter of Krishna book, and then they said, "Jai Srila Prabhupada." The Jai was not so much as out of ecstasy that they have heard or read about Krishna, out of that, okay, the first chapter is over, let's now go for prasadam. Then Prabhupada said, okay, next. And then somebody started reading chapter 2. And then chapter 2, I think, is Garbhastuti, the prayers by the demigods when Krishna was in the womb of Devaki. Beautiful descriptions. And they finished. And after that, again, the chapter came to an end. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, okay, next. And then the chapter 3, they were thinking, okay, after chapter 2, probably Prabhupada will stop. And they read chapter 3. And then Prabhupada looked at all his disciples. They were all tired and exhausted and sleepy and about to fall, waiting to break their fast. But a disciple of Prabhupada, a devotee, he recalls that Prabhupada was rapt attention he was hearing, fully alert. This is the difference. It's not that Prabhupada was asking them to do something where he was not interested. He himself was hearing, and he was alert, he was hearing it with full rapt attention. This quality of Prabhupada was even noticed by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. That yes, Abhay, hears very attentively. When he was recommended for initiation, yes, I know Abhay because he hears very attentively. This was repeated by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur 2-3 times. Okay, hearing discussions among the devotees is the only means to receive the powerful message of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For instance, Bhagavad Gita has been well known all over the world for a very long time, especially in the Western world. But because the subject matter was not discussed by devotees, there was no effect. The conclusion is that if one participates in a discussion of devotees, he is both materially and spiritually benefited. Transcendental topics of the Lord act like injections. Transcendental topics of the Lord act like injections when received by the sincere devotee from a person who is perfectly uncontaminated by material tinges. In other words, reception of the messages of Srimad Bhagavatam from professional men heard by a Karmakandiya audience never acts miraculously, as stated here. Devotional hearing of the messages of the Lord is not like hearing ordinary topics. Therefore, the action will be felt by the sincere hearer by experience of the gradual disappearance of ignorance. The crucial test of hearing Srimad, this is a crucial test, is that one should get positive enlightenment by such an act. अगर मैं feel, oh my God, एक class तो खत्म ही नहीं हो रहा है, मैं खाऊंगा कब, मैं जाऊंगा कब, यही सोच रहा हूँ. That's not true. Crucial test of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam is that one should get positive enlightenment by such an act. And Krishna says, simply by trying to know him, one becomes liberated. See, the word is simply by trying. Simply by trying. We don't know. It's impossible to know the Lord. But simply by trying that effort, one becomes liberated. Simply by trying, not perfectly, even imperfectly, because he is endeavoring to understand Krishna, that very activity will make him liberated. So these are some of the important thoughts and points about this verse that we took. Anybody has any question or any comments? No questions, no comments. Okay. Here there will be no questions, no comments. But when question comes, no answers. That's our characteristic. Anyway, these are all wonderful narrations. Please pay attention. As I said, this is not to prove somebody who's superior from another one. It's not okay. How much you are able to remember? You're not able to remember anything. It's not like that. The whole thing is how, because these are practical things. A boy who's born of a maid servant could get transformed to become an eternal associate of the Lord. Think of the power of this Harikatha. If it is done in the right mood, right spirit, the right way, it's transcendental injection. It can completely purify our consciousness. Yet because of our faulty habits, faulty hearing, because of passive hearing, no taste comes. There is no taste. It's not that people can't hear. People can talk. People can hear. They can talk in hours. I've seen people on phone and doing some mundane things. They can talk for forever. But when it comes to Krishna Katha, feel sleepy, no interest, lazy. Oh, you go a little this thing, my mind is becoming disturbed. It's because we don't have a taste. Our taste muscles have not developed. And the taste muscles can develop, as Prabhupada says, Shat Mahat Sevaya Vipraha, in that verse of Bhagavatam, which comes, engaging in devotional service to a pure devotee. Shat Mahat Sevaya Vipra. Punya Shravana Kirtana. No, what is it? Punya. Sushusho Shraddhadhanasya Vasudeva Katharuchi. Syat Mahat Sevaya Vipra. Punya Tirtha Niseva. Punya Tirtha Niseva. By rendering service to a pure devotee, when we engage in rendering in devotional service to a pure devotee, eagerness, the eagerness to hear about Krishna develops. Actually, Prabhupada in that purport, the last line, he says the eagerness to hear about God is the first qualification. Mind you, the first qualification of a devotee eligible for entering the kingdom of God. The eagerness to hear. So this is the power in the, if you take
Prabhu, so how to develop the interest in like reading the books of Srila Prabhupada?
How to develop interest? This is the whole class was about that only. How do we develop? The first thing that is required is to have our attention, to do an active listening, active reading. Active listening and active reading is when you read Prabhupada's words and reflect on it and see, try to say yourself in your own words the understanding of what you read. Reflect upon it, then apply it. Application doesn't happen. We just hear, we have during over prasadam, after the class, we have discussion about the class. And sure, after that, we don't think about it. Because we're not used to, we're not trained, our muscle is not developed. It's like you go to a gym and the first day the gym instructor asks you that, just do something for 30 seconds, be in some position, and your muscles are not developed, you can't even remain for a few seconds. Similarly, right now our muscles are so weak and we don't do anything about it. There is no active There's nothing that we are doing actively to develop those muscles. It can be developed. It can be developed. Like they keep the poster of someone who's got some 6 packs, 8 packs, and all those things, and then उसका चरण ले धूल लेके बोलते हैं okay ठीक है मैं भी एक दिन I'll also become like that. So whoever it is, Salman Khan or John Abraham. So like that, we need to see who are the John Abrahams and the Salman Khans of devotional life, the Goswamis, how they could do this, how they were so absorbed in Krishna Katha, how they could control their mind, how they could control their senses. Why can't I do this? That should be our goal. That should be our role model. It's a process, and it can be done.
Yes, we have to take care about the atyahara prayasascha prajalpo niyamagraha. We have to take care about this because if we are considering that we are Vaishnava, then we have to jansangascha lolyamcha. So these 6 things we have to strictly take care of. Otherwise, it is.
No, basically you have to read attentively, listen, and hear. There is a significant difference. We tell our children, or we would have heard it from our parents. Did you listen it? Did you listen carefully? Why do we say that? Because hearing, our ears are always prone to. There is no unless you are putting something to close this. We are exposed to all kinds of sounds. We are hearing everything. But there is a difference in listening and hearing. Listening is when you are putting your attention, when you're trying to understand, when there is an interest. So this Prabhupada is saying simply by hearing, the whole thing is simply by hearing one can become an associate of the Lord. Still, I'm not interested. If I tell you I came from Mexico, you'll accept. Did you see me boarding the flight in Mexico? No. Did you see me coming out of the flight which landed here from wherever? You didn't. But you accept just because I'm saying. But when it comes to Lord, we have this mentality, pehle dikhao, just show me. See, let me see it. The hearing, actually the process of knowing God is Shrutekshita, my process of hearing. Only through this process of hearing we can know the Lord, and the Vedic literatures are filled with description of the Lord. So it has to be very, very attentive, and there has to be an eagerness to know. It's not like some, okay, उसको बोला है बोलने के लिए, बोलने दो उसको, देखते हैं क्या बोलता है. हम बैठ के मजा लेते हैं, तो स्क्रीन ऑफ करके हम लोग लग गए अपने काम में. And then you ask something, hey, Prabhu, I was not there. Why you were not there? For whom this is meant? Okay, we will continue to see this wonderful journey of Narad Muni, how he got transformed. Actually, every step has an importance. Uchishta lepan prasadanu modito. That was the words last time. This time he was anugrahena vishranvatam. He's hearing attentively. By their mercy, pragayatam, they are glorifying Krishna Katha, which is manohara. And this person, this Narad Muni got an opportunity to hear. There's so many descriptions of so many people who just hear little here and there, and their contaminated aim of life becomes transformed, changed. Vishaya vidusitam, that the goal of life, which is something happened to us also, we took it up, but then we don't take it seriously, we don't do it properly. So the result also is like that. It's not very, it's gradual, slow. So when we do this, and we will see what else Narad Muni did and how he transformed, what all he did, how he could become Narad Muni. It's a beautiful description. The best example that one can give is the example of one's own life's experience. And Narad Muni is doing exactly the same thing. He's telling from his own life how he got transformed. So let's hear this. This is very wonderful description, and pay attention, relish, absorb, ask questions, get involved, learn and churn. Then you can, you look forward to this discussions. What's going to come? What's next? Otherwise, simply मैं बैठा हूँ, आओ class हो गया. It's like that it will go. जय ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, जगत गुरु श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय, निताय गौर प्रेमानंद, हरि हरि बोल, हरे कृष्ण.
Hare Krishna.